Ladies and gentlemen, in order to keep us on time, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next bit. As we were putting together the schedule, it was mostly Nate. As Nate was putting together the schedule for today, I can't remember who it was, but one of us on the planning committee realized, none of us are talking. I actually had a couple of people reach out and ask, well, what are you guys presenting about? And we're like, we kind of wanted to put the spotlight on the junior people and the senior people who've got so much to share. And, you should do so. Okay, we'll come up with something. You've heard us talk about this special issue. That was the original impetus for this whole conference to be put together, was that we wanted to get the special issue authors together. And by the way, can I just get another round of applause for the special issue authors? I thought that was... Guys and gals, I got excited while I was listening because it was my first time being exposed. We've had some editorial separation. I was just focusing on mine and they just focused on theirs. So it was my first time seeing some of these ideas and I was very excited by a lot of the things I heard. We are also writing an editorial. We are required, actually, by the journal to write an editorial. The 5 of us on the editorial team, this is everyone, the 4 of us on the conference planning committee, as well as our friend Jeremy Muser, who couldn't be here today. Pneumonia. Hopefully he's doing all right. He's doing a little better now. Most editorials for special issues are, let's be honest, fairly forgettable. Not all of them, but most of them are fairly forgettable. Hey, welcome to our special issue. We're writing about X. Isn't X great? Let us give you a brief summary of all the papers we have on X. Did I mention earlier that we're kind of susceptible to escalation of commitment biases? Yes. So one of us, I will not name this person, one of us came up with a great idea. Let's just do something really ambitious for this editorial because 1, we've got the opportunity, and 2, we're the editors, so we can write whatever we want. So let's do something a little different. So we are in the very opening stages of talking about this, but I wanted to share some very general ideas briefly with you on what is the future of servant leadership research. 2 caveats here. 1, I'm speaking really specifically to the researchers with a lot of this, but I'm going to be watching those of you who are more practitioners and academics to see kind of what your reaction is to some of the things we have to say. And 2, some of us on the team have what I've been told is kind of an antiquated approach to solving problems in research, and here's what I mean by this. And actually, I think this is why I work with Chad Hartnell so much and so well, because he's got the same mindset as me. He looks so scared. He's not sure what I'm going to say. Is that if I see a big problem or a burning question in academia, in our research, something we need to figure out, I do not automatically jump to the meta-analysis as an answer for that. I don't automatically jump to methods. Just pulling an example out of the blue, if someone says there is a flaw with this survey, I do not immediately conclude that the whole field needs to be scrapped. I actually like to go back to the theory. I like to go back to the basics and the concepts behind it. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about. And this is what we've been talking about with our editorial. Anything that you see or hear that you really like, it was probably by Chad or Nate or Jarvis. Anything that you don't like, it was probably by me or Jeremy. He's got pneumonia, so his head's not quite right. What is, ladies and gentlemen, the future of servant leadership research? That's why we're together. This is what we care about. This is what we want to build, right? Well, what is it? Here's what I'm supposed to tell you. We want a growing body of work in top academic journals studying correlates of theoretical and practical importance. Right? Yeah. Woo, yeah. Inspiring examinations of the relatively rarely studied area of antecedents. Several of you were doing that. That's great. Exciting attention to new moderators and mediators. Thrilling integrations with unconsidered theoretical perspectives, which again, a lot of you are doing. Dramatic research around how it works across and between levels of analysis. That's hot. Compelling empirical frameworks such as longitudinal and daily diary studies. Look, our people are doing this and I didn't even know it, and I'm losing my voice. Sorry about that. And of course, bold new experimental designs to keep our friends at Leadership Quarterly happy. A few of you know what I'm talking about, the rest of you maybe not so much. These are what my good friend Chad Hartnell would call the usual suspects. One of his favorite phrases. These are the things we're supposed to talk about. These are the things we do talk about, and there's nothing wrong with any of these, and you've seen that the research is moving in these directions. Many of you have written these very same things. I have written these very same things. But I want to ask this question from a slightly different, broader, and a little more abstract perspective. Here's our question to you. Where will the field be in 5 years? In 10 years? Will it still be studied? Will it be published in top journals? Will it be in textbooks? Will practitioners know about the research you're doing? Will it be affecting what they do? Will this be a field that's known as servant leadership? Well, that's just leadership. That's just what leadership is. Or will it be forgotten? Like, will we have made a difference in the world? Or are we just spinning our wheels and writing for each other? This is honestly the stuff that keeps me up at night. This is really what keeps me up at night. I'm that weird researcher that I'll bet you are too, that actually cares about our research making a difference in the world beyond just our citation counts. Although we do pretty good on that too. Have you seen this quote? Decades of research on leadership have produced a bewildering mass of findings. The endless accumulation of empirical data has not produced an integrated understanding of leadership. Ouch. I take that personally. Does anybody know who wrote that? Any guesses? Oh, Antonakis. I wonder why you guessed that one. No, not Antonakis. Sorry, no? You see, we're thinking about a lot of people recently. Watch this. This was Ralph Stogsdill in 1974. In 1974, decades ago, we're thinking this could have been written today. This was written 50 years ago. Here's another one. The research on leadership has left us with a clear view that things are far more complicated and contingent than we usually believed. And in fact, so complicated and contingent, it may not even be worth our while to spit out more and more categories and qualifications. That could be written today. And this one's my favorite. Of all the hazy and confounding areas in social psychology, leadership theory contends for the top nomination. More has been written and less known about leadership than any other topic in the behavioral sciences, so we've invented an endless proliferation of terms to deal with it, and still we don't know what it is. Could that be written today? I noticed this when I was doing my dissertation studies, which wasn't that long ago, it was 9 years, I'm old, 9 years ago, wow. That it feels like we've been teetering on the brink of disaster in the leadership field for decades, at least in the eyes of some of our most prestigious fellows. In fact, I think it is only really great, exceptional work by people like Bob Lydon and Dirk van Dierendonck who've kept us from completely collapsing. The diamonds in the rough that have kept this field going. This is a table that I go back to a lot, that's going to be familiar to a lot of you in this room. This is by a paper that Dr. Lydon was on, Din et al. 2014 in the Leadership Quarterly, in which they listed over 60 different approaches to leadership that they cataloged were being studied at the time. Over 60. And keep in mind, this list does not include the recent ones that have just come out and become popular in the last few years, like humble leadership, or inclusive leadership, or paradoxical leadership. We're seeing more and more papers like this. Will they all continue to be studied going forward? Probably not. Will most of them make a difference in the world? Probably not. Do they deserve to continue to be studied? That's a harder one. Maybe not. But here's the question we should all be thinking about. This one, right here, this one with the red circle around it, what makes it different? What's going to make it go the distance? What's going to make it last? What's going to make it stand out from all the others? Will it survive? Why will it survive? Will it be a factor in 20 years? Will it still be on the list like this, or will it be at the top of the list in bold print? That's what I'd like to see. That's up to us. That's up to us. Now, as I was putting this together and going over ideas with different people for it and with the team, one person mentioned to me, well, is that even important? Like, does it matter? Does servant leadership really matter? What if it wasn't anybody in this room, it wasn't anybody in the planning committee? One of my colleagues said, what's wrong with it fading away if you get some papers out of it and the field evolves to another form of leadership or something like that? This wasn't someone who studies leadership. And I'd ask you, what do you think about that? Because I have found in my career that there's two different types of researchers. There's the type that researches what the next hot thing is. Like, this is what is popular. This is what is going to get me a JAP or an AMJ. This is what's going to make my name. I don't really care about it that much, but I want to make my career. And there are a lot of, we can all think of probably people we've met who, and fine, they're pursuing their career, they're instrumental. There's some of us, especially for servant leadership, who look at it and say, I want to research this because I want to make a difference with it. And by the way, if you don't see that, if you research servant leadership and haven't made that connection yet, the one person whose writing I've read that gives me the strongest sense of that connection, and fortunately he gave you a copy of his new book today, go read some of Kent Keith's stuff. Go read some of Kent Keith's stuff on servant leadership, and you will see and understand exactly why what we do can make a difference. Now, we are not allowed as scholars to be normative, right? We can't say, you should go do this. This is the right thing, go do that. That's not how we publish papers. But I believe that what we can do through this research is provide descriptive evidence for the power of normative good in organizations. Does that make sense? We can provide the evidence for the power and meaningfulness of normative good in organizations. And for that reason, I submit to you this field is important, and this field is worth protecting. And that's our job. Now, several of us on the team are fortunate to be AEs at some really good journals in our field. And I will say that some of the editors-in-chief that I worked with have said, oh, you're the leadership guy. We'll send you all those crappy leadership-style papers. And I see a bunch of these. I see a lot of servant leadership submissions come through in the journals I work with, and a lot of them are pretty similar. Okay, here's servant leadership, and it leads to performance or commitment or satisfaction. Isn't that amazing? Wow, but don't worry, we've got more. Here is a brand new mediator. That will get you there. And it's a lot like what you've studied before, but you've never seen this exact word before, so you should publish this. Or maybe, look, it's a brand new moderator, and it's similar to things we've seen before, so you should publish this. And I'm so glad, we didn't see anything like that. We haven't seen anything like that today. And I always noticed that if I replaced the word servant with transformational or ethical or authentic or empowering, it would work exactly the same. And my colleagues are nodding their heads because they've all seen the same thing too. This isn't moving the field forward. This isn't helping us build the field's credibility. It's the kind of research you've seen this morning and this afternoon that is different, that could only be done with something like servant leadership, that is going to build our field's credibility, that's going to make a difference. And why is it important to build our field's credibility in the first place? Because that's what gets it into more textbooks. That's what gets it into more practitioner books. That's what is going to make the big difference in the world beyond what any one of us can make on our own. Now, I don't think the people proposing models like this, they're not bad people. Some of them just might need some support to get to the next level. Or some of them might be looking for the next pub. But it's models like this that don't protect the field or build our credibility. So what questions do we need to answer? One of the reasons behind the special issue was we don't want people like Dirk Van Deeren, I'm talking about your colleague. We don't want people like Don Van Nippenberg to write their next article in 5 years slamming us like they did with transformational leadership, and all of a sudden we don't see any servant leadership papers anymore. How can we preemptively address those complaints? Well, they say that too many leadership streams have same-ish models with boring and intuitive predictions. They say, do we really know what this construct is? Do they say, is it really even unique as a construct? Is there a reason all these dimensions fit together the way they do? Is there any real theory underlying its predictions? Are we really measuring what we think we are? We've all experienced these questions before, haven't we? Reviewer 2, right? And it's always Reviewer 2. What in the world is this? So, our job is to answer these questions. And I am so encouraged by how many answers, good, convincing, compelling answers I've heard so far today. Have we answered these questions so far for servant leadership? Well, we've tried. Maybe we haven't done it good enough yet. Sometimes we have very different models with new and intuitive predictions. I will tell you, I've read, if you're like me, like Google Scholars figured out you like servant leadership, and you see a ton of papers come through your feed all the time, and I read them, and most of them I'm like, meh, meh. Now I will say, I have never read a paper with the byline, with anywhere in the byline, Leiden or Van Dierendonk, and not gone, wow, that's interesting. So there is a way to do this, and there are some people that have figured this out. Do we really know what this construct is? Here's a weird thing that we don't talk enough about in the leadership. In any other field of organizational behavior and psychology, we are required to define our construct as we start our paper. Most servant leadership papers never say what it is. And we get dinged for that. Now, some people like Larry Spears don't help at all, because in one of his introductions to Greenleaf's series of essays, and I quoted him for this in my dissertation, he said, one of the marvelous things about servant leadership is that Greenleaf never gave us a definition, so we can figure it out as we go. That doesn't help us, we're researchers. We've got to figure this out. In the very well-cited review, Eva et al. 2019, a definition was put forth. A few of you use that. Use that. Open your papers with it. If you don't like that definition, work your way down this ladder. I gave a definition in my paper with Terry Blum, published in Personnel Psychology. If you don't like that, great. I listed some definitions in the review. I did. There are other, but if you don't like those, come up with your own that builds on the giants of the past. But for God's sake, let's all define it so we can tell people, here's exactly what this construct is. And here's why it fits together. And that's the next thing. Is this unique as a construct? We think so. The reasons aren't consistently used. Again, I love the fact that today we've got a lot of papers. It wouldn't work for transformational. It wouldn't work for empowering. It wouldn't work for ethical. Ian said last night one of the biggest things was you've got the servant first coming into this. And I like that. My colleague Chad and I have argued that the big differentiator is that servant leadership comes from the utilitarian mindset, and that's very scientific. What we meant by that was it comes from a place of care. It comes from a heart of love. You want to see the best for everybody. And that doesn't mean that virtues aren't involved in it. It just means the virtues are directed towards we're going to do as much good as we can for as many people as we can. Is there a reason its dimensions fit together? You ever get asked this? I get asked this at conferences all the time. And I would say, of course they do. And they say, well, where is that written down? And I say, well, I mean, there's some really good papers. I point to Bob's. I will tell you that the one person in this room who I think has done the best job of tying the dimensions together, and I'm sorry, it's not a competition, but like I'm always motivated when I read this, is actually Dr. Spears. With his 10 dimensions. He's really put the reason there for why they all fit together the way they do. And on the more academic side, in our top journals, I've never seen a paper that does it as well as Dirk van Dierendonk did in his 2011 review for JOM, which I just learned is now one of the top 100 leadership cited papers of all time. Wow. How about that? Is there any real theory underlying its predictions? You know what I loved about the presentations this morning? There were a lot of things, but we didn't just see social identity theory again and again and again, social exchange theory again and again and again, social learning theory. There's lots of different things. Do we have to always draw on the same theories that every other positive leadership style uses? Is it possible that servant leadership could be its own theory? I made the argument in my dissertation that what Bob Greenleaf did, the way that he put this together through observation and iteration, sounded a whole lot to me like the grounded theory building process that we all learn about in graduate school. Maybe there's a servant leadership theory there that we could have all of our own. And are we really measuring what we think we are? Well, I think so. There's plenty of validity to the top scales we use, especially Dirk's and Bob's. They are subject to rater biases, absolutely. Are they correlated with other leadership scales? Yes. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think they would be. If there's another positive leadership behavior, we'd expect a positive correlation. But those two would probably tell you, and they have told me before, yeah, they're good. They're not the best. Are they perfect? No, maybe we could keep working on this, but that doesn't mean we throw everything out. These are the questions I submit. If we can answer these convincingly, servant leadership will not only survive, but it will be known as the approach to leadership for the 21st century. So that's all we want to do in our editorial. Yeah. That's pretty much it. Have you heard we're doing a special issue? We're so proud of this. It's not just a special issue on servant leadership research, it's a special issue on strengthening servant leadership research. We very specifically picked papers and manuscripts and ideas that wouldn't work for any other style of leadership, that accentuated what is unique about servant leadership. We specifically mandated this in the call. And we said only junior scholars can be the first authors for this. Because I've got ideas and the senior scholars have ideas, but what could be more servant leadership than stopping, pausing, and listening to what the people, the doctoral students, the people we don't listen to enough have, because they've got perspective and ideas that I've long forgotten. And our best and brightest senior scholars serving as supporting authors to help develop and guide the next generation of resources, researchers, Dirk, Jasmine who else have we got? Sinsen Jaya, Mitch Newbert, and Emily Hunter, all serving as senior scholars on these papers. Ian McFarland, who you heard from yesterday, he is writing a surprisingly dynamite paper from the practitioner's perspective that's going to show up in the special issue if we can get it cut down to under 100 pages at some point.
It's at 150 now.
I asked you to cut some. And then we've got the expert's perspective coming from the gentleman who we think is sold in all the way, Dr. Robert Leiden, partnering with Dr. Don Van Nippenberg, who is exactly the kind of person we need to convince. So we're really excited about how we're doing this. And as I said, we get to write an editorial. We don't want it to just be a summary of articles. We want it to be part of the toolkit for making our research more credible. We want it to be a starting point that people can build on. We hope to address questions like the one we just raised. Is that ambitious? Yes, but we're not going to do it in one article. We realize that this is not a sprint. This is a cross-country relay marathon. And we are going to pass the baton to you, and to you, and to you, and to you, and to you. And the only way we'll succeed is if we keep passing that baton, if we keep answering these questions, if we keep proving to the people outside of this room that they should all be here, because this is the future of leadership. So a few simple things for especially the junior researchers to think about. Have you made clear to your audience what servant leadership is? There are a lot of concrete definitions out there, no thanks to Dr. Spears. We've got a few. Pick the one that makes the most sense to you. Let's run with it. I'd say EVA et al. 2019 is a great starting point for that. Have you leveraged and built upon the work of our giants? Jill Graham, 1991, Leadership Quarterly, one of my favorite papers ever. Dr. Leiden, Dr. Newberg, Dr. Patterson, if you haven't seen her work before, Dirk Van Dierendonk, and how about folks like Ken Keefe and Don Frick and Larry Spears, the ones who, they're not your traditional academics, but you can learn a lot by reading what they've got to say. What's really different about your model? Don't just add a new construct, tell us why it's important to servant leadership, and is there a theory that we can build together, our own theory, a servant leadership theory, based on Dirk's work, based on Bob's work, based on Larry's work, based on Bob Greenleaf's work, that explains why servant leadership is unique and uniquely has the outcomes we're talking about. We can't do all this in one paper, but we hope to pass you the baton. Long time ago, guy named Bob, how about that? Guy named Bob had some really countercultural ideas about what leadership could be and should be. And I wrote some things down because I wanted to say them really briefly and really clearly. What we are doing, what all of us in this room are doing, literally has the potential to make the world a happier, healthier place. And I know I'm not supposed to care about that as a research scholar in some people's eyes, but I do. And I believe you're here because you do too. And so I applaud you for that, and I'm glad you're part of this journey with us. We need to build this field so we get into more textbooks, so we get into more practitioner books, into more class curriculum. This is a noble calling. This is a noble calling. And the nice things about noble callings is when you're engaged in them, you get to work with the other people who appreciate the noble callings, some of the best people in the world. I'm so honored to work with everybody in this room as well as the people on the team with me. We can do more, and we can do better, and we can do it together. This is important. We're so glad you're on the journey with us, and we hope you'll continue. Thanks for being part.